Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. The sun is shining. We got a lot of rain. And it looks like we've got some more rain coming in today. So very interesting weather happening for us. I'm gonna let a couple more people. I know we've got some people waiting. We're going to let a couple more of them in. Just a couple updates before I hand the floor over to Peter. Just want to make sure that you guys are working on, if you have your license renewal, that you're working on your CE. So make sure you're getting that done before, the end of June here. And if you have any questions in reference to where you're at, definitely check Paul's portal. If you haven't checked that, you can reach out to Francis and he can definitely help you along that way, along with Jeremy. So definitely look at that. Another disclaimer that I have to put out there for some agents, we had a little bit of some trouble over the weekend. We had an agent who had asked a few different people to do open houses. And my disclaimer to this is if you commit to doing an open house for another agent, please make sure that you follow through and communicate with that. We had a situation where somebody didn't show up to the open house to host it. And that's a pretty important thing, especially to a seller expecting to have an open house. So please make sure that you're communicating very well with that listing agent and then reminding yourself that it is an opportunity to host these open houses. I don't ever see them as a burden. I actually see that as an opportunity to gain more buyers. So just basically respect each other's time and listings and the branding around National Realty Guild. So definitely keep that in mind. Without further ado, I am going to introduce Peter with Real Property Management Liberty. And Peter is actually an NRG agent as well. He's been here for over a year, I believe. Peter, you'll let us know, but he is the person who, if I have a property and I cannot get it sold, or I have to kind of think outside the box and send it over to Peter, and he definitely helps clients rent out their properties. And then, in the long term, he'll send them back to me so that way we can list it when it's the appropriate time. But it's kind of problem solving around these solutions and coming up with the best solution for your client at the time. So Peter, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then what your company does, and then we'll go from there.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Jill, and thanks for having me. Um, I I had to laugh because when you asked me to do this, about a week ago, I was like, oh my gosh, how do I explain property management to a bunch of real estate agents? Many of who have been in the industry probably far longer than I have, and probably have plenty of experience with property management themselves, right? So I really had to think about it and kind of think about, okay, what's unique about me, right? And the thing that popped in my head was, well, I'm a franchise, right? So my hope here today is just to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on what a franchise looks like and some of the automation that comes with it, in hopes to spur some conversation in terms of people who are out there doing property management or just don't understand it, kind of see a little bit of the inner working. So with that, Real Property Management, who are these guys, right? So Real Property Management was founded back in the 80s, and they were a very successful property management group. Sometime in the early 2000s, they franchised, and then have been growing, well, not quite exponentially, but very quickly over the last 20 years. I think today they're approaching 500 independently owned offices across the country, which makes them the largest residential property management group in the country. So with that, I have a good network of people that I communicate with on a regular basis, just understanding the industry, what best practices have and how they've evolved, just the dynamic legal arena that property management sits in, because those rules are always changing and states are trying to do different things in different ways. Some tend to be more owner friendly, others tend to be very tenant friendly, like Minnesota, is a very tenant-friendly state. So just kind of how does all that work? But, you know, with that, I mean, we're also talking about real estate. So property management and real estate, very similar industries. There's a lot of stuff that I do that is similar to how this group would show properties. And so like, I'd like to show some of the ways that I've put together how I do it, which is probably similar to how you would show a property for sale or a listing. So I'll try to share my screen here. I didn't put together a real formal presentation, just grab some screenshots to add a little context. And I'll just go through an overview of kind of how it works for me, which I'm sure will kind of take some tangents along the way because there'll be questions, I'm sure, because, you know, there's not one way to do this, but I've kind of found a way that works best for me. And then Jill, I'll just ask you if I start going down rabbit holes just to pull me back out.
I will definitely do that. You've seen the screen share button at the bottom of the screen.
Yep. So
Okay, I'll let
got
you
it.
know when we can see it.
All right.
Perfect. You are all set.
Okay. All right. So, you know, what is the big difference that I've kind of found? I mean, between real estate and property management. I mean, the biggest thing is we're marketing properties to give places people to live. One on a rental basis, one on an ownership basis. The biggest thing in the property management space is you are getting into a long-term relationship. And you're getting into a long-term relationship with tenants, and you're also getting into long-term relationship with owners, right? So for me, how does this all start, right? And it really starts the same way. I mean, it's either a phone call or an initial consult, where I'm getting on the phone, having a brief conversation, to really understand, okay, what are you trying to do here? You know, what are your goals? You know, are you looking to rent? Are you just looking to find a tenant? Do you want property management? Do you even know what property management is, right? Usually it's no longer than a 15-minute phone call. You know, sometimes they go a little longer, but really what I'm trying to do is understand, you know, what you're looking for, answer any questions you have initially. And then my goal is to set up a meeting at the property if possible, right? I want to come out, I want to see the property, I want to meet face to face. And at that point, we can have a much more robust conversation about how it all works, right? But along the way, I'm really trying to find out, you know, is this a person that I can communicate with, right? I think one of the things that I've learned is a hard owner can be just as tough as a hard tenant, right? So I really have to have that conversation to really set expectations, right? Because there are just some properties that shouldn't be rentals, right? It's just not going to cash flow or it's not going to meet their goals. And those types of properties will really kind of suck the life out of you and take up all your time, and everybody kind of ends up frustrating. So I could still be better at it, but just learning about what's going to work and maybe how to say no, or maybe this isn't the right opportunity is been a really big learning lesson for me. And I'm getting better at having that conversation with people because, you know, early on when you're hungry and you just want to take everything on, right, it can really bury you if you don't have that. So I would say that's a really important point is, you know, it's starting with just vetting the owner and making sure that your goals are truly aligned and you can actually meet their expectations. Because if you can't, you know, you're not helping anybody at that point. You know, from there, you know, just like in real estate, I mean, the second part is just analyzing the property. You know, I'm really over there to gather the data, right? Not quite as detailed as what the MLS has. Like I'm not really trying to get dimensions of rooms and all of that detail, but really number of bedrooms, you know, what is the state of the paint? What is the state of the carpet? What appliances are there? What are the, you know, what condition are they in? Is it central air? How do the utilities work for that particular property, right? I want to gather everything that I need in that meeting with the exception of pictures, to really be able to go back and build a listing, which I can show you. I'll regress just a minute because I think one of the big elements is really the property management software that the franchise has created a relationship. Many of you guys have probably used it or at least heard of it, but we're using Appfolio, right? Appfolio is really kind of, you know, I don't want to say it's the best, but I would say it's the best in breed, you know, or one of the best, you know, in terms of property management softwares. And they are really doing a lot to automate a lot of the processes. So for me, that's huge because that's a time saver, right? I'm not reinventing the wheel every day. Once I get it figured out, I can really program my system so that I'm pulling information from applications or, you know, pulling information from properties that I set up, and it all will populate into a lease or from, you know, from an application into the lease. So I'm not having to type that every time. I'm really just, as long as I've set the property up and the tenant has filled out their application correctly, which I will check because obviously there's a screening component to it. All that information will flow right into a lease, and I can really generate a lease, I mean, in as little as 5 minutes if I had to. So that's kind of a really neat aspect of it, but I will come back to the leasing process when we get to it. So from there, I mean, this isn't a great screenshot because, you know, I had to be a little careful not to put any personal information in there, but this is just one segment. You can see this scroll bar here. It will go all the way down. So a lot of what's above and below this is really just like property details. So number of bedrooms, what's the rent, you know, all the way down to what's your late fee policy on late rent, right? Do you charge a flat fee? Is it a daily fee? Is it a combination of both? You can put all that in there. You're putting things like, what's your leasing fee, right? So I'll get into what a leasing fee is here in a minute. What's your management fee month over month? Like, so it's all gets put in here when you're building the property. And that's information that I capture when I have that initial meeting at the property, right? That's usually about an hour-long meeting. We're talking about goals, we're setting expectations. I'm asking questions about the property, what's broke, what works, what do we need to fix before we, you know, start showing the property and such. But really what I've captured here is just kind of a snapshot of like just my write-up. And, you know, you can see there's some amenities here and a lot more stuff above and below. Below this would also be where I'd enter the pictures for the property. Once I've set up the property, there's a button over here. I just click it. It says post a website. So I will post it to my website. My website, I actually use a software called ShowMojo. So there's an integration there. ShowMojo is very similar to ShowingTime. Again, not quite as detailed as ShowingTime in terms of like all the approvals that you would need and that sort of thing, but really it just syndicates to my calendar. So if somebody were to go on, you know, once it gets to ShowingTime, or ShowMojo, which is here, right? That's going to push it out to probably 20 different websites, right? So this is just kind of an example of a listing I have here, and here it is on Zillow, right? So this would be a property that I've recently marketed. So it'll be on Zillow, Trulia, you know, probably 20 different sites, just like, you know, any listing would push out to the internet like that. What's nice though is this request tour button, if you press it, right, it's going to send me an email that says you've got a new lead. You know, they'll put in maybe a little bit of information, but then ShowMojo will then kick them back a link, you know, via text and email where they get options to basically pick a showing time, you know, and I will have to block off my calendar if I'm not available. Like I really don't want to do a 7:15 tonight if somebody clicks on this, but I can set that up however I want, right? And it's all automated. So it just really eliminates that back and forth between the prospective tenant, you know, so I'm not having that conversation like how's Friday? No, Friday's no good. maybe Saturday, after 11 or something like that. You can really get bogged down with that. But so this really kind of automates it. And they will be able to, you can set up showing criteria if you want, that will make it so that they need to qualify. I generally don't do that too much, right? I'm kind of open-ended, show up and we'll figure that out during the showing. But my showings are very interactive. I do them all in person. I really want to meet the person that I'm showing it to. I think that gives owners peace of mind too, which is one reason that I haven't utilized the MLS too much with property management, because I've lost that step of being face to face with the tenant as I'm doing it. I have had other agents show, but I just feel more comfortable at this point doing them myself, because I'm really, as I said, we're about to get into a long-term relationship if it works out. So I kind of want to start off on the right foot, just understanding what, the tenant's looking to do, and ask those kind of deeper level questions that somebody who's not as familiar with the property or is intimate with the property is going to ask. So with that, once we get to the showing and everything goes well, and they want to apply, sometimes they'll ask right there. I'll always give them my card, direct them to my website. And this is just a screenshot of a link, that's on my site, but it'll highlight the property, right? And there's really an apply now button right here. So anybody over the age 18 has to apply separately, right? I'll group them together as a unit, but if you're an adult, you have to send in your own application. It's very easy. It's very straightforward. And, we're just looking at the same thing that, the industry would ask for is, what's your income? What's your credit look like? Criminal, rental history, evictions, right? We kind of go through all that. I know that this is a potential point for rabbit holes, right? Because there's probably so many questions about how to screen. But what I would say is the industry's really changed a lot. I mean, rent is very high right now. I see all sorts of things on credit applications, but one thing I don't see a lot is everybody who meets every criteria perfectly, right? I mean, just, this particular property, I mean, you can see, we're almost at $3,000 in rent there. And if you take that and, do the math on, what the standards say, where 30% of your income should be towards living, well, that's, over $100,000, right? So people who are high earners like that, I mean, your pool of renters shrinks for somebody, who's looking, that has that much money and looking to rent. Now, they exist because, you have corporate, you have people that are moving to a new state and the housing market's not right, so they need a temporary place to live. But obviously that pool is going to get smaller the higher the rent, right? So that's a consideration that I have a conversation with owners with, is just say, just understand, I mean, we're market stating that this is the rent, the comparables, everything we've looked at, right? But what's our pool? What's realistic here in terms of getting a tenant in there? So with that, I mean, that's just another conversation to have. But once they hit the apply button, right, this is just a quick screenshot. And again, it's, there's a lot more information in here than I was able to show, but I just wanted to show that all that information from their application gets, condensed into, a screening profile. And then obviously I'm using AppFolio to screen them. So I'm going to get a credit history. I'm going to get a rental history. If there's any evictions, I'm going to get a criminal. If there's any criminal stuff in there, I'm going to see all that, right? The biggest thing for me, like, there's always going to be something, right? That I'm looking at. But part of the reason I like to do my showings in person and just have a really communicative style about it is, if there is something there, there's usually a backstory there. So as I'm trying to evaluate my tenants or my prospective tenants, and they got a low credit score, or there's something in there, right? Like, I want to understand, like, tell me like, I see that your credit's low. You were, I appreciate that you were forthcoming during the showing and you told me that, right? Um, tell me about the fall from grace. What happened there, right? Oh, I got divorced 2 years ago. My car was in my husband's name or, my wife's name, and she stopped paying the bills. But then I will be able to see, what's happened for the next 2 years. Like, are they on track? Are they trending up or are they trending down? Right? Because if you don't have a perfect screening, I'd love to be able to say we can hold out for the perfect tenant, right? But that's a very difficult thing to do. Time is money in this, right? I mean, we are talking about vacancy, which means somebody's probably paying the mortgage on the back end. And they may not want to wait 3 months to get a perfect tenant, right? They want that vacancy filled. So really what we're doing is mitigating risk, if that makes sense. And I know that's a wide open conversation because how people do that, could vary a lot of ways, but that's just a little glimpse into, how I perceive that. The nice part about all of this is all of their information is captured here. So what you're not seeing is like email, dependents, cars, all of their job history, phone numbers, all of that is there. And what that does is when I click a button over here and I've approved them, I can send out an approval letter with the click of a button, just says, congratulations, you've been approved. I will be drafting a lease and sending it to you in the next 24 to 48 hours, right? So that approval letter will go out, they're notified. And then I can click move in tenant and all this information will roll into my lease. So let's see if I have that screenshot, which I don't. But basically, in order to draft a lease, because it will pull all this information in, I really have to fill in about 5 fields, right? Which pre-populate into the version of the lease I want. I have multiple versions of leases just based on the circumstance, but they all are based off the same basic information. So, I've had power of attorney, right? Which needs to be cited in there somehow, right? So I may have just created a new version of a lease for that, so I don't have to reinvent that wheel, right? Or, there could be any number of unique circumstances like a pool, right? So that I may have to add certain things in there for a pool. So I don't want to have to redraft a whole lease. So I have one set up for pools, but I usually 95% of the time I'm using a general lease and I'm pulling all their information in. And then from there, I can electronically just send that to the tenants. It'll go right to their emails. They can electronically sign it. It comes back to me. I countersign, and we have a signed lease. In the lease, it'll state, and really, I'm just trying to go through kind of the process up to move in, and then we can open it up for questions. It'll state that you need to pay that security deposit within 72 hours of signing that lease, right? That really is going to secure the property so that I feel comfortable taking it off the market. Because things change quickly in life and tenants get different ideas, but once you have that security deposit in place, right, then I really feel comfortable taking it off the market. The lead up to move in, after the lease is signed, after I have security deposit, I'm really working with them to make sure that they're getting their utilities transferred over. So that's part of what I capture in that initial meeting is, do we need to call the city? Will the city even allow you to transfer water and sewer, right? Sometimes that has to stay in the owner's name. If it does have to stay in the owner's name, how are we going to deal with that? Are we going to pay for that and increase the rent? Are we going to forward that to the tenants and make sure they pay it? Because now you run into problems where they may not be able to set up auto pay, right? And then that just opens the opportunity for things to get missed. So we just want to make sure that we have a plan in place to make sure that we understand how the utilities are going to work. But I'm really working with the tenants to make sure that they're getting them transferred. They know their start date, they know their service address. Everybody's changed utilities. It's as easy as calling. But you'd be amazed if you don't talk about it, it'll get missed, right? And then the owner's gonna get a bill for electricity and then they're gonna call you. So that's been something I've really kind of hit on. The other piece of that would be insurance, right? The renter's insurance, I can offer you renter's insurance. I have it through AppFolio. If that's easier for you, you can use your provider that you have for your car insurance. Anything will work. I just need a copy of it before we move in, right? Just to make sure that that renter insurance is in place. So that's a requirement of my lease. And it has to have $100,000 liability on it at a minimum. So, from there, we're leading up to move in, and once those tenants are getting close, they need to pay their first month's rent before I'm gonna hand over the keys. Interesting thing with AppFolio for anybody who's used it before, that first transaction always takes extra time, right? Like, there's a lot of fraud protection within AppFolio. They're really vetting the bank or, however they're doing it internally, but just know that could be 3 to 5 days before that money actually clears and lands in your bank. So I'm over communicating that with the tenants. I'm saying, if you want to pay this electronically, just make sure we're doing it about 3 to 5 days in advance so that I can actually see that money come through before I'm handing you the keys. I've heard horror stories from other franchisees that have had the tenants pay rent. They hand over the keys, and guess what? That payment got rejected. There were no funds. And then it created a mess, right? You're going back and then you look like you've got egg on your face because you didn't check that at the beginning. There are other alternatives. I mean, I'll tell them, I'm like, if you want to pay the day before, you can give me a cashier's check. I'll take that, and that'll work. Not preferred by me, that's just extra work, but I'll do it, if that's how it's gonna work. And then ongoing, everything kind of functions normally. Rent's due on the 1st, you have your grace period, and you are late on the 6th. Or you're late on the 2nd, but you are getting fines on the 6th, late fees. I'll just touch on one quick point here that I think is important. Everything that I've been taught through the franchise is about process, right? Process is about mitigating risk. Anybody who's been in the property management game for any amount of time knows that things come up. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna be a couple days late this week, right? A couple days turns into a week turns into next week, and the next thing you know, you're in trouble, right? They get far enough behind, statistically, they're not catching up, and you're in a place, right? So there's a thing in Minnesota. Minnesota is unique. We have what's called a notice to quit. Notice to quit in Minnesota is 14 days. You have to provide that notice to quit and allow those 14 days to expire before you can move to eviction. Otherwise, you're out of luck. Most states are 3 days. Minnesota's 14. So what I do, I'm calling tenants on the 4th and 5th, going, hey, I haven't seen your rent payment in. I don't want you to get any late fees this month. What do we need to do? Can we get that done, right? On the 6th, I'm calling them. I'm like, just so you know, you're getting late fees. Is there anything we can do? On the 7th, I'm drafting notice to quit, right? And it doesn't matter what the reason is, right? I've had somebody call me and told me they were in the hospital because they had a heart attack. And I'm empathetic to all situations, but I'm sorry to hear that. Just so you know, you're past your grace period. I have to send you the notice. And I sent it certified mail, so it's proof that it was sent. It doesn't mean that if they don't pay, that eviction is the only end all be all to it. It just gives us the opportunity, right? If you don't send it, you don't have that in your toolbox. And then, you're just selling yourself short on that. So it just goes out. I always send a nice email along with it and send them an emailed copy and just say, it's our policy. If you're beyond your grace period, we send out these notices, right? So the last thing you want to be is end of the month, you didn't send out the notice to quit. Now you find out they're going to be delinquent the next month. you've just lost 2 months of rent. Plus, if you do finally send it out and then you get to the point where you do evict, you're probably looking at another 4 to 6 weeks, right? To get them out. You lost 3 months of rent, maybe 4. That's thousands and thousands of dollars, and all it took was sending out one letter. So I won't hit on that too much more. I just want to kind of skip to what does move-in look like. I'm meeting him the day of with the keys and the garage door openers. I give him a quick tour. I always touch on furnace filters and water softeners. Those are the two things that tend to get screwed up the most. I mean, because tenants don't understand water softeners. Most people don't understand water softeners. I didn't understand water softeners until I got into it. But I mean, it's very simple, right? You just check on it every now and then and make sure it has salt and it's doing its thing, right? But not having salt in there will destroy your water softener. It'll lose its polarity. I don't know how to say that. The stuff that takes the stuff out of the water, but it won't function correctly, and if you leave it, it'll damage it without salt. So I'm doing, quarterly, if not bi-yearly inspections, just to go over there and check on those things. Just take a peek. I can tell right away if I pull out that filter out of the furnace and it's black, oh, you haven't changed it, right? And I made sure there was 3 of them sitting right there. It's really easy. You just take it out, you put it in. So, those are kind of things that are going to wear a property down really fast, and they have huge expense costs on the back end. So, just making sure that that is covered. Anything else unique about the property, making sure all the keys function properly before I give them to them. I've checked that obviously beforehand, but just so they understand how everything works, and it's one kind of final check. Security deposit, the last piece here that I'll touch on, and then we can open this up. I use a software called Rent Check, right? It's a really cool app. Basically what happens is once I've moved the tenants in, I'm sending them just a link or an email, which they download on their phone. And it's really a guided tour through the property, right? So it'll start you at the front door. You can kind of see that I've built this inspection out, but it'll start you and it'll ask you, take a picture of the front of the door, right? What condition is that door in? Is it good, fair, or bad, right? And then it opens it up for comments below it. And it'll walk you through the kitchen. Take a picture under the sink. Take a picture of the sink. Take a picture of the fridge. Open the door of the fridge. Take a picture. So it's a little tedious because it probably takes 30-40 minutes to complete, depending on the size of the house and the number of rooms, right? But it doesn't have to be all done in one shot. A tenant can do it over the course of a week, and I typically just set a deadline and say, hey, in the next 14 days, just get this back to me. And it'll send out reminders to them, if as days go by and they haven't done anything with it. And it's really peace of mind for the tenant, right? Like, hey, I'm protecting your security deposit here, so you don't want to blow this off. Just make sure that you do it so we get a good baseline of what it was like when you moved in. That was just a really quick high-level overview of a lot of things. So I can dig into anything you want. Answer any questions to the best of my ability that I can. And Jill, I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Yeah, wow. No, I am very amazed at how much technology is here on that side of this is amazing. So I'm assuming, Peter, when you do this move-in inspection, you can also do a move-out inspection. Do you have the tenants do that, or
I do it.
you do
right?
it? Okay.
Yes. So I'm going back to the property after they've moved, right? And then I'm getting a condition of the property. And then I have their move-in inspection to compare it to. And that really gives validation too, because if I'm saying, hey, I needed to spend this much money because there's huge carpet stains in this bedroom, right? Well, I can go back and look and be like, were those carpet stains there at the beginning,
Yeah.
right? I don't think so, because that was brand new carpet that you moved into, and now it's kind of ruined. So, and really that's to protect me. right? If I go and say, hey, I had to charge you $400 to get this carpet cleaned, and they argue that, I'll be like, here's your inspection. You know, they're,
Can't really fight facts.
yeah, they're there. So,
Yep.
uh,
Okay.
I haven't had anybody, question me too hard on my move outs, right? Because it's kind of there. You know, it's hard to argue pictures.
Mm-hmm. Um, there's a few things that I jotted down which are very interesting, and I'm just gonna kind of correlate them. This is very similar, and I know me and Peter have had this conversation to the real estate industry as far as what we do. I mean, we're doing showings. Obviously, we're not the ones getting like the pre-approval letter, that's the lender, but you're working on that as well. How many showings would you say you do on average on like a rental property? You know, is it like 4 or 5 before you like go like, oh, I'm gonna pick these people?
Um, really, I I'm looking for the first qualified that I'm not getting too many red flags on, right? And there's so many nuances to tenant profiles. I mean, um, now we're really dealing. I have a lot of owners that say no pets, right? But we have ESAs now, right? Emotional support animals. And you can't legally deny somebody with an emotional support animal. So they have to have documentation from their doctor. And there's a lot that you can look at those letters. I mean, it really has to state what's the rationale for having this. Um, I always ask if they have pets. I've had one, I have people that, big red flag for me. I have 2 emotional support cats. Oh, 2, huh? Interesting. Like, so, not saying that you don't, but that's just something that pops out as me is like, you have 2 emotional support animals? Like, it just it's got to pass the smell test. But to answer your question, how many showings do I do? I'm really looking for first qualified, right? And that's kind
Okay.
of the standard. Now, I will do multiple showings in a day, right? And I will get multiple applications that I have to review, right? I'll look at the first one. If I don't feel good, I will move on to the second one and then the third one. But it's not the same as give me your final and best offer. We're taking applications through Monday type process. It's a little bit different in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. My only other question, and then we can kind of open up the floor. How do you explain to, a client that's looking at renting out their home that has not done it before and just is really, really leery of the process? Because what you just went through on this, I think kind of reassures, people, homeowners, and going like, I'm the one taking care of everything for you. You don't need to worry about it. The one thing that I jotted down was like all the laws and the rules and everything along it, having the lease. I mean, a lot of people are like, I don't know how to come up with a lease. And it's like you take care of all of that for them. So how do you explain that to a homeowner?
If I understand your question right, I mean, but communication, right? I mean, that's key. So the biggest thing is, I don't I don't get as many questions on people worried about the actual contents of the lease, right? But I think to your point, there are a lot of people, generally speaking, the concept of renting out your place is pretty straightforward, right? We're finding tenants, they're going to pay money to live there for a certain amount of time, right? But I think what they don't understand is, I mean, as you're living in your house, like there's maintenance costs that you go through over the course of a year, right? You just use your front door enough and that handle's going to get loose and it might fall off, right? Those costs don't go away because you're now a landlord, right? Like they're still there. Like, there has to be some general upkeep on the property or that property is just gonna, degrade over time, right? And then that's where you hear all these horror stories in property management, right? So it's really going in there. It's really setting the expectation for that owner and just saying, here's what you can expect, right? One thing that a lot of owners don't expect is they're not gonna cash flow right away, right? There's time and money that goes into getting your property turned into a rental. Most cities these days are requiring rental licenses. And if you've never rented before, they charge you what's called a transfer fee to turn it into a rental, which can be as much as $500. Plus the fee of the rental annually, which could be another $250, right? So right out the gate, you're down 750. My leasing fee, which I think is pretty fair, I charge 75% of first month's rent. So, and I cap that at 1,500, but let's just say it's a $1,500 expense, plus you shelled out $750 for a rental license, plus we repainted, so there's another 1,000 in painting, right? You're negative pretty significantly right out the gate, right? And I think that's one thing that people who haven't rented before don't really think through, right? They just see their property, oh, I could rent this out and make some extra money, right? Well, there's a little bit more to that getting into it, right? I mean, like it's a commitment, right? You're turning your property into a rental, and so you just have to understand the costs of getting to where you want to be, right? Over time, it'll cash flow, hopefully, if everything kind of lines up correctly, and that's ultimately the goal. And it's a long-term investment, right? So you're cash flowing over time, and then you get the tax benefits of having a rental property as well as just the appreciation of the property. So that's really what you're looking at. It's not a quick fix to be like, I'm gonna get rich because I'm turning my property into a rental.
There is a question in the chat here. Do you charge a client for a consult?
I do not, no. And I will talk to anybody. So, I mean, even if it's just educational purposes, like they don't know if they want to rent. They thought about it at one point. They don't understand. I'll sit down. I'll walk you through the whole thing. I have no problem doing that. I like to educate on that, right? Because I learn too, right? I get more experience just learning from people and what their perspective is on the world. But no, there's no charge for a consult. I'll sit down, I can start it just by having an address, doing an online search, but at that point I'm providing ranges versus actuals. And then until I really see the condition of the property and walk it, then that's where we dial it into what I believe the rent should be. And I'm happy to start the rent according to the owner's desire. I will just advise them what I believe is the correct price. And within 2 to 4 days of having it on the market, we'll know if we hit it. I mean, if there's crickets out there, we're probably high, right? Or if I'm getting showings but no applications, we're probably a little high, right? Somebody's beating us somewhere. So then it's just another conversation of like, here's the activity. I usually do a roll up once a week with it, my owners, and say, here's the showings I did this week. Here's the feedback I got. And any other data points that I've collected, like, hey, I always ask, are you looking at other places? What's out there? How's the market? Is it hard to find a 4-bedroom in this city? All those kind of questions. Just I bring that back and just helps me kind of gauge like where we're at with it. I've had properties that I know we listed it at the right price, but it's just a unique enough property that it's just not attracting people that are willing to make that commitment at that time, right? Maybe it's a little far off the beaten path, or there could be any number of reasons why, but you have to just understand what all the factors are, and then really try to kind of dial it into what we're working with there. The other thing I would say is, I think maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but the different, in real estate, you're dealing with, 180-day contracts, listing contracts, right? I am really trying to get your place rented in less than 3 weeks. Because, at the end of 3 weeks, we're probably sitting at the end of the month. Well, people who are looking to rent are probably ending their lease looking to get, if we're at June 20th, they're probably looking at August 1st, right? So timing is really crucial in terms of when you get it out there. I tend to move pretty quickly because from the initial meeting at the property, if everything feels good and we're aligned, like I'm trying to find a time to take pictures in the next 2 days, right? And there is one thing else I'll mention about pictures too. I mean, because of the speed factor, like I take all my own pictures at this point. I feel like I do a pretty good job, but really, I mean, just those 2 days, if it's a Wednesday and we want to get on the market for Saturday, like I need to turn those pictures around, edit them, get the listing built and get it up by Friday so that people are searching over the weekend to try to get showings for the next week, because those first 2 weeks are critical. If having that thing not be vacant is important.
There were three more questions in here, Peter. Do you do high-end rentals? Do you do commercial property? And do you have to be licensed in each state to do what you're doing, like with a real estate license?
Okay, so high-end properties, yes, I do. They are, I guess I need to understand. I consider a high-end property probably anything with a rent over 2,500. That would probably be my baseline. They tend not to rent as quickly. And it's you're again, you've shrunk your pool for people who can afford that. But the property I used as an example here today, we're listing at $29.95, right? It's a 5-bedroom, beautiful, fully remodeled house. I managed a property in Eden Prairie on Olympic Hills Golf Course for a number of years. That would be what I definitely would call a high-end property. So yes, I guess the short answer there is yes. And I just would also just reiterate that those properties take a little bit longer, and you're looking at a unique clientele there that's going to probably rent high-end properties, but it's definitely doable. Second question, remind me.
Commercial.
I do not do commercial at this point.
Okay.
I would love to branch into commercial, but it's not something that I've have the experience in residential doing.
You're focusing on one thing at a time. Is
correct,
that? Yeah.
And then the third question I think was licensing. Yeah, to be a property manager, you have to have a real estate license. We're showing properties, so that's really I think the big key to having that real estate license, or why you have to have it in order to do it, to be able to show properties. So yes, and then each state you're going to get licensed, individually for each state.
Peter, what would you say is the biggest like learning curve that you've had getting into property management?
Treat people like humans. Talk to them like they're real people. Honestly, I mean, like you could read my lease. It's like 20 pages long, right? There's everything in there that I could enforce, right? But I've really found that just the ability to communicate with someone like they're a person, like don't put your legal recourse at the end of your sentence, right? Like that it makes people tense. It makes them not want to talk, right? Just be like, hey, how can we resolve this issue? Like, there's really a conflict here between, you and your neighbor, or, I mean, eventually you have to get to that point where you're holding them accountable with whatever you need to do and what tools you have available. But I mean, there's a pathway there, and I think most issues can be resolved by just talking to people like they're a person, right? No matter how ridiculous the circumstance is too. I mean, like, the other thing that I've learned is, people live differently, right? They have different living habits. So I walk into a house, I say, is there anything broken here? Is everything functioning right? Yes. Well, that's because of the way that they lived in that house, right? You get new people in there living and they start using stuff differently. you're going to find broken stuff. It's just the way it is. And so you just have to be prepared for that, right? And I think letting the owner know, like, hey, we all live differently. So that would be two kind of takeaways. I mean, most of the learning experience that I have is the intangibles, right? Like, there's the rules and there's the laws, but like we're really dealing with people here. And how you approach that can really set the direction for where the conversation goes from there.
That's just good advice in life right there, Peter. That just in general every day, but I love that. You gave me goosebumps saying that. Like, I think that's amazing. Does anybody else have any other questions for Peter, property management wise? Any other questions about his life experience through this process? You can unmute yourself, you can put it in the chat.
Yeah,
I
I
have,
do have a couple of questions. When you say that the people are, I see red flags when people are not qualified, do you need to give justification for why they did not get the place at all?
You do. So if I mean, there's a huge thing in the industry where application fees are non-refundable, right? So I'll just touch on that and then I'll get directly to your question. But you know, a lot of times I will meet with people at showings and they'll be forthcoming that say, hey, you know what, my whatever is not perfect, right? And I will tell them, I'll say, look, I'd rather have you apply so I can look at it. And the way my application works is once you submit, like I'm gonna get, your income and your job information. And there's an area that you can fill in what you make, right? Everything for me is trust but verify. So if you tell me you make $5,000 a month, show me the pay stubs that you make $5,000 a month, right? Because they'll say 5,000. Well, that's after tax, right? Or before tax, right? So after tax, they're really making 4,200. So I'm really trying to crunch the numbers and be like, can you afford this, right? And I'll straight up tell people, I'm like, I don't want to put anybody in a bad place, right? Because if you're in a bad place, then eventually I'm going to be in a bad place, and we're going to have to do some difficult decisions. But so I'm screening the income because that's really what's telling me the most about if they can afford it. And then I'm just taking a glance at their residential history, what they put down, right? Generally, as I get further into an application, I'll start to see holes, right? I'll start to see holes between what they told me and what I'm actually finding, right? Those are huge red flags for me because it's like, okay, you weren't being honest, right? Like that's one thing I don't tolerate is you're lying to me, right? Because that's just going to set how this relationship is going to go. And like I said, we're getting married here. We're in the long-term relationship. So, but if there's red flags prior to me actually pushing the credit screening and criminal history screening button, I'll call them up just to ask clarifying questions, but say, you know what? I'm sorry, but I don't think this is going to work out. I'm going to refund your application fee and we're going to just move on, right? I'm not in the business to make money off people's application fees, right? I'm just trying to put good people in good homes. But with that, if I do screen them, now I have a cost involved, right? I have to pay for that screening. So I'm not able to refund that application anymore. But if I end up screening them and I deny them, yes, they need a disposition letter that says exactly why they were disqualified. And otherwise I would have to refund their application fee. But yeah, so you can't keep it, just deny them and not tell them why. And you want to keep that as generalized as possible, right? It doesn't have to be a long explanation. You were denied because of your credit history, right? You were denied because you didn't meet the income threshold. Boom, done. Move on. Don't get emotional about it. Easier said than done, but it just is what it is.
So my next question is, thank you so much for the just answer. My next question is, all these forms and like um, the applications and everything is, do you have it on by I mean, your own, or is it from the franchisee what you are with?
I have my own application. So I could probably find resources for you to find an application, but I mean, mine was provided for me. I've customized it a little bit. You know, really the biggest thing is, you know, mine's automated, so like, you know, you're entering in information, but then it allows you to upload supporting documentation behind it. You know, capturing social security number, so that we can run a screen. We can run a criminal background check on you, that sort of thing. Like, that's all captured in there. The biggest thing is the disclosure at the front. This is a non-refundable application. You're going to be required to do X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, please do the best you can to make it complete, because if I get an incomplete application, you know, I'll go back to them and say, look, I need this. Like, a lot of people won't put their dependents in the application. Well, you know, I just need to know who's going to be residing in the property, but they'll skip that. And I'll say, hey, I really want to get through your screening. Can you please shoot me an email with your, you know, dependents' names and birth dates, right? It's just part of the application fee. So there's a huge component of just incomplete applications, right? Or, you know, hey, thanks for submitting your application. You only gave me one pay stub. I can't really, you know, do what I need to do to verify your income with one pay stub, right? Because people will do that. They'll send you February's pay stub because that's when they got paid their commission. So it looks like they make more, right, on that particular pay stub. So just looking for those holes. But I think that, you know, there's probably a lot of resources out there that have application software. Just Appfolio has their own. And then my franchise has helped me customize, you know, to be, you know, to work with how I do business.
Peter, there is something in the chat about the application. Is the application fee only the cost of credit check, or do you add your time into that as well?
I do add a little bit for my time, right? I mean, so I charge $55 for application fee, which, you know, the feedback I've gotten on that is that's reasonable, right? I think 50, 55, but you know, there's some that are as high as 75 or 100, right? So I don't get too much flack for $55, right? But it is per adult, right? So you know, it's boyfriend, girlfriend, spouses, whatever, you know, 3 brothers, you know, they all have to pay the $55 because I have to screen them all, right? So that charge, you know, is going to be tripled for me as well. But then, you know, the amount that I'm charging for my time, you know, isn't really covering my time to be honest. Like, I'm spending longer processing these and making phone calls and asking questions and checking on rental references or, you know, job references far exceeds what I'm charging.
Perfect.
I'm sure you've said this, Peter, but how much do you charge the owner, like your client?
So there's three components to this. Component 1 is the leasing process, right? So that's at 75% of first month's rent, right? And that is really covering me doing all the marketing, the photos, building the listing, getting it published to the internet, doing the showings, the application process, all of that, the move-in. You know, that's really what that charge is for, which is the 75% of first month's rent capped at $1,500, right? The ongoing charge would be the monthly management fee, right? So that is tenant relations, that's rent collection, that's doing the accounting, that's processing all the billing. So if there's any maintenance charges and that sort of thing, I'm doing that on a monthly basis and then generating statements for the owners so that they can review their account. And then the last component would be maintenance, right? And I would say, you know, in terms of maintenance, like, I'm the first line of defense, right? I'm really trying to triage what the issue is because maintenance issues, like tenants don't have a really great ability to articulate what the problem is. It's more like my oven doesn't work. Okay, can you elaborate on what's not working? Does it turn on? You know, is it plugged in? So really just trying to triage that. If need be, I'll go out there and determine for myself what the problem is if we can't resolve it that way. And then it's making a decision on, you know, is this something that I can fix, or is this something that I need to get a professional out here, or is this a replace type thing, right? So that cost of the maintenance fix is going to be on the owner, right? And typically there's a coordination fee. So my coordination fee for having those conversations, probably visiting the property, figuring out the problem and what the most cost-effective expedited solution for that problem is 15% of the invoice. But if it's a large charge, you know, I'll set a limit that we can establish at the beginning that says, look, if the fix is over $250, let's talk about it and we'll figure out what the solution is. Because I'm not going to charge you 15% to have somebody replace your air conditioner for $5,000, because that would be a crazy high charge, right? So we'll work on that on larger items, but smaller ones, a lot of times it requires me to go to Home Depot, grab a compression valve, swap out the supply line to the toilet, and you know, I'll charge you a minimal, you know, I'll charge you the cost of the material and then like $45 an hour, which is probably half of what a plumber would charge it. But if it's just me like coordinating that plumber, like I'll have to get them into the property. I'll coordinate with the tenants to make sure that they're home or, you know, not home, whichever we decide we're going to do. And then make sure the job gets done. And for that, I just do a little surcharge of 15%.
Couple more questions here, Peter, and then we're gonna let everybody go. How much is your monthly charge?
Advertise 6%. But I will evaluate that based on the property as well, right? You know, if you're in Waconia, right, that's going to be a tougher property for me to manage just because of the distance, or you know, condition of the property may affect that. If you have multiple properties, I just advertise 6%, and I will say there's a little room for negotiation.
That brings up the next question that I got texted to me. What is your radius, your location? Where do you like to, you know, help people?
Yeah, so you know, I office out of Shakopee, right? So I have a number of properties in Burnsville, Shakopee, Chaska, that area. But I do have a select few properties. I have one in Anoka, I have one in Shoreview, I have one in Plymouth. You know, so I'm kind of spread out, but at the same time, like my core is in the Southwest. But again, I'll talk to anybody and just, you know, I want to understand the situation, what we're looking to do here. You know, Shoreview is a hike for me. But I do get out there, you know, quite a bit just to check on that property. So I will travel, but you know, my core and my base is kind of in the Southwest.
Perfect. What I will say to NRG agents, if you have a property that is not selling, that you're just having trouble with, and you need to come up with a problem-solving solution, Peter is my go-to. Peter is the go-to, you know, for Randy for property management. And then also I have had a few agents in the past couple months asking, like, how do I get into property management? And I'm like, yep, I'm not the person you need to be talking to about that. You need to call Peter, because Peter is the one who knows the ins and the outs, and he's going to be real with you about it. Like, this is what it's going to take to get into this. So I just think the knowledge base around it and the fact of like just being real about the situation. The one thing you said, Peter, that I wrote down too, which is really interesting. You said, you know, everybody thinks that they get into this to make make money, even homeowners. But it costs money to get into, and it's the same thing with a business. So I would say if anybody at Energy is, looking at property management, reach out to Peter, have a conversation. If you have a client, again, that, you're looking at, it'd be better to rent it out right now and then sell it, maybe next year, call him. He's going to evaluate it with you and work with you on that process. So, Peter, best way to get a hold of you?
Email or cell phone, I can put it in the chat.
That would be amazing.
If I can, am I still sharing? Oh, I'm gonna stop shit.
Yes. Yep. No, that would be great if you can put it in there. Again, reach out if you have any other questions, just in general, a lease question, Peter's a great go-to for that. So thank you guys so much for taking the time. Peter, thank you for taking time to explain this to us and to show you the process. Again, I just love systems and processes, so it's really cool to see the behind the scenes. But you guys go out, have an amazing week.
I was just gonna say, Jill, if anybody wants to reach out, because I didn't dive deep enough into any one particular area, because I know it was really high level, shoot me an email or a text, and then we can figure out a time to have a deeper conversation.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that, Peter. All right, you guys have a great week. Reach out if any other questions, and then we'll go from there. Bye.
That's not my email.
Oh,
Hang on. I don't know why I put those numbers in there.
there we go.
Perfect. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye.